Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rodman Primack. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of Design Miami. I know many of you, and I'm happy to see you back here at the Design Talks. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our good friend and great patron of design, Nadia Swarovski, who's been involved with Design Miami since really from the very, very beginning. This is our 13th year in Basel. And it's our 4th year of collaborating on Designers of the Future. And truly, since you came on board, the program has really gotten so much energy and life and has become, it's always been an important part of our program and of the design world, but it's really become something even more special. And we're so grateful and pleased that you do it with us. And we're so excited that you guys are all here today. Nadia, I'd love to introduce you and bring you up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodman. I can only say it's been such a pleasure to collaborate with Design Miami. And it's been amazing to see how this also has evolved. I remember actually Rodman going to the first Designer of the Future here, and they were featuring Mark Newson. So guys, we all know what happened to Mark, so we really look forward to the new chapter of Designers of the Future. But for us, it really is always a wonderful opportunity to push Swarovski crystal beyond its comfort zone, beyond its boundaries. It's so important for us to get the feedback from the designers. They are certainly on the pulse of everything, of the zeitgeist, and what's important for us to make the product relevant to that zeitgeist and relevant to the new customer of the future. So on that note, Design Miami came up with the topic of smart. We are so tuned in to our technology. How does technology influence us? How does it support us? And we see a wonderful interpretation with the artworks of our wonderful designers here. Mr. Kolkman. Then I'm having Ori Ushigome. You can pronounce your name correctly later. Yeah. And then our friends here from Studio Portable. And it's wonderful to have Deyan Sudjic, the director of the Design Museum, here from London to moderate the entire discussion. Thanks for being here, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Is this working?
Okay.
Yes. This is actually one of my favorite moments in the year when we see what Swarovski has managed to make possible. Each year it's a very different group of designers. The range of skills and their backgrounds varies every year. I'm not sure there are any Mark Newsons on the panel this year, but lots of very gifted people in their own ways. There are some connections. Most of them have had time in London, which is encouraging given that London is in the middle of cutting itself off from the rest of Europe, but it's still a place which actually attracts gifted, clever, smart designers. Frank Kolkman is from the Netherlands, but was at the Royal College of Art. He's worked on a range of, I would say, critical questioning projects. Among other things, we showed a piece of his at the Design Museum 2 years ago, which was a commentary on the massive costs of industrial medicine. He managed to produce a robot that could do keyhole surgery by downloading pieces off the internet. I didn't try it myself, but I have I'm about to try the piece upstairs. We also have, I'm going to get this wrong as well, Yosuke Ushigome.
It's not too bad.
You're very kind. I have similar problems myself, actually, but who is actually London-based, but your background is not a conventional industrial designer, but really you're from coding and software.
Yep.
And you are you're part of a practice which has offices in both Tokyo and in London.
Yep.
And I did actually take the precaution of actually asking Studio Portabile why they call themselves Studio Portabile, and apparently it's a Japanese joke.
Oh, partly, yes. Yeah.
It's a Japanese-Dutch joke.
Well, is it funnier in Dutch than it is in Japanese?
Way funnier, way funnier.
That's good to know. And Studio Portabile has been based in London for 7 years, I think you told me. 9 years?
Yes.
8 or
Eight,
something?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, 8.
Right. And there was one Royal College connection, but you also actually began training as a fashion designer in Arnhem.
Yes, in Arnhem, where he studied initially
So
as well.
the design world is both huge and small.
So, yes.
So first of all, I'd really like to ask our 4 designers really to talk about how they responded to this brief. I mean, smart living. These are strange times. You can actually now buy a dumb phone. Jasper Morrison designed the phone which actually frees you from the slavery of always being on. And I think the theme has actually been interpreted by our 4 designers in ways which are slightly questioning about what the world is doing to us as it becomes more and more digital. Frank, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Yeah, so in responding to the theme of smartness, like especially in technology, there's this idea that if you bring more technology into the home that is connected to each other, that your life is going to become smarter and more efficient and flowing. But the problem is actually that efficiency is very interesting maybe in an industrial context or in a business context, but actually it maybe doesn't even translate that well to a home where it's much more about sort of also being messy, being relaxing, having like deeper social interactions. So I approached this theme much more to try and do the opposite, to actually provide moments of reflection, because we see that by bringing more technology into the home, actually we have much more stress and anxiety popping up. So the idea became to think of smarter ways to relax. So in researching ways of doing so, I encountered a principle called brainwave entrainment or brainwave synchronization, which was developed in the 50s and 60s, also under the influence of the Beat generation. Actually, behind me on the left, you can see an image of a dream machine by Brian Geisen, an artist from the 50s and 60s. And this is a principle that allows your brain to enter a state of deeper relaxation. So inside the brain, there's all kinds of activities happening at every time, and they happen in certain frequencies. And if you're in a deep sleep, for example, there's specific frequencies that are more active, so the alpha and the theta waves. And actually, if you stimulate your vision by producing with those frequencies, so in sound or in images, the brain starts to copy those. So from there, the idea became to actually use Swarovski crystal, because it has these qualities of actually shimmering and flickering light, by moving them to produce light at certain frequencies so that the brain could enter this state more easily. So initially, we wanted to try and transform this into a sort of a recliner chair in which you could then take place and then enter this state more easily. But eventually we figured out that technically it would be more feasible to actually make it into a daybed, and also fitting more with the theme of sort of this wellness experience. And I started doing some very early prototypes, very simple, as you can see here on the table, with some by rotating crystal. And by actually rotating prisms, you could see that you could control those frequencies by altering the speeds at which they turn. And the nice thing was that they also started to emit these beautiful rainbows that were shooting out in every direction. And that sort of became the starting point to really develop this further. At which point the team at Wattens stepped in, because I think what most people don't know about Swarovski, and also what I didn't know about Swarovski, was that a lot of the production equipment for their crystals is actually produced and designed in-house. So they have a very big engineering team, which we wanted to tap into with this project as well. So actually wanted to bring forward the sort of engineering skills and show that Swarovski is actually also a technology company and not just a luxury fashion brand, which I found very interesting. And then we ended up with wanting to design a daybed situation, and we actually, in this, I had some help from Jonathan Olivares at one point as well in discussing possible configurations for this. And we ended up thinking that we wanted to produce this piece that would house the crystal, and actually by rotating the crystal we would get this feedback sensation, this dream machine. And then the idea could be that you could place a daybed next to it and then actually recline and sort of like have the whole wellness sensation going on. And here you can see how the piece is then produced inside the factory in Wattens. And I think it may have, I'm not really sure, but I think it may have been the first time that we created like a very complicated mechanical system to actually rotate the crystals. But I think it's really turned out amazing, and it's like really interesting to see how they have so much control not only over the quality of the crystal, but also the precision engineering that goes into it to make it silent and everything moving very precisely, allowing it to have this very dreamy quality mixed in with this very obvious machine aesthetic, and have this contrast, which I find very attractive myself, and I hope that it resonates with a wider audience also. And here you can see the end result in the fair upstairs, and also it's open for the public, so you're all welcome to try it out. And the idea is that I like to think of it now as almost as like an inside-out chandelier. So normally you have a chandelier that you gaze upon like together, it's like a very social experience, and then you snap a picture and you post it online, and this is sort of doing the opposite. So it's literally like a chandelier that you can lay down into, and then if you close your eyes, the flickering patterns create all kinds of hallucinatory patterns almost on your eyelids, which become almost like very personalized flicker movies, and therefore make it a very sort of individual experience, which I think is quite interesting.
It's really had quite an impact on some visitors, I gather.
A few actually fell asleep, so I think it's working. Yeah,
It's working. Okay, so Studio Portabile.
Portable.
Portable.
Sorry,
fine.
it's yeah, it's English.
I'm still recovering from this morning's session about radical Italian design. But
Oh, yeah, so,
who's got the clicker?
well, I think our approach is more abstract and more analog in nature, which is kind of how we operate usually. But we wanted to kind of use this idea of technology. I mean, we've been interested in technology, both old and new, for a while now, and we've done lots of projects related to the idea of technology. And when I say idea of technology, I mean how we interact with new technology at any given time in history, and how we kind of sometimes try to make sense of it, and how also these new technologies would open up new possibilities for the things we thought we knew at something, but could have a new life, or oftentimes these are kind of filters to our reality, especially the media devices that smart living is talking about in a larger sense, because every medium has its own effect on the content. So that's been kind of interest of ours as well. But for this project, we also wanted to use technology at Swarovski as a kind of key pivot to utilize it, because you might think Swarovski is this almost traditional material, but it's also, back in the days, it was a cutting-edge technology. And so we are interested in two main components, which is material production and cutting of the material. So we wanted to use those two things, this kind of very sophisticated, sophisticated technology, to create something that feels more blurry or fuzzy or almost ambiguous in nature because of the way it's made and cut. So it's we don't actually have like a reference images for this. It kind of came out of like a combination, combining different details, related to technology and historical ideas along the line. So we're using these colored, tinted crystals that's cut in a way so that it kind of the colors fade away towards the edge of it. And because of the way it's laid, placed in the surface, as you walk around it, it kind of changes its appearance and becomes different things depending on where you're standing. And I think in our mind, it was a kind of subtle reference, almost like a metaphor to, new technologies where, you're often subtly or kind of, I don't know, like you need to make up your own mind about it, to especially take something into your home. These things are supposed to be doing something, but you're also slightly ambivalent about the side effects or, other powers that those things have.
But this is about a beautiful surface effect.
Also, but that's largely achieved by the material in a way.
But this is not like Apple trying to make the perfect screen
No.
for their handheld. It's
No, this is almost the opposite. Of,
Yeah.
Yeah. So the screens. The topology of screen. I mean, again, that screen is kind of type of object we always liked, especially the ones that works almost like a filter rather than a blind. And the idea, really, the design here is the tiles. Tiles is the proposal, but we wanted to make screens as a way to show the tiles because we thought it kind of, creates a nice, I don't know, like a spatial intervention where you can walk around this screen. It doesn't obscure your view, and you can kind of see through the screen as well.
it's a kind of architectural object,
It-
like
yeah.
a door, a window.
Yeah. So even though we design tiles, we always intended tiles to be used not stuck on the wall, but placed in the space that you can walk around it to get this effect as well.
That big screen is quite heavy, isn't it?
It's very heavy. But it seems light, which is an interesting thing as well. It's very heavy.
No one's going to steal it.
No.
So Yosuke.
Yeah. Yosuke.
Yosuke.
Yeah, all right. That's okay. Take the U out, then it's easy
Well,
to
your
pronounce.
project is very much about that. This is
That's true.
Siri should be explaining to me I'm pronouncing
Yeah,
your
exactly.
name incorrectly.
Exactly. But it's up
give
to
me an
your...
electric shock for getting it wrong.
It's true. You get one with Frank's machine. Torture machine. Right. I'm having kind of technology background. I have studied computer science masters in Tokyo and then moved to London to study in the design interactions course at the Royal College of Art, where Frank also graduated. And so we sort of loosely connected in this kind of London practice. And I tend to work with emerging technologies, and I tend to sort of create emerging visions how they can be consumed in our society, not necessarily how they can be applied to specific application or functions, and then try to sort of visualize a narrative by using various prototypes that are kind of tangible and experiential, just experiential enough so that people can discuss it and potentially make decisions about it. And this time, with the theme of smart living, I kind of started. I've been really interested in this kind of AI systems, little kind of servants, starting to have some sort of space at home, like you name it, like Alexa or Siri or Google Home devices. They're having this kind of interesting, like a very, very geometric, technical-looking objects that are starting to occupy our home environment, and then they are sort of changing our behavior too. And one of the famous anecdotes we used as a reference, is this 4-year-old girl who had started using Alexa at home from 6 months ago. She started becoming a kind of a bit of a kind of asshole by not saying thank you or please to adults too, because she now understands that anyone who she asks to will be doing something for her without saying thank you or please. Now Amazon is inputting this kind of child parenting mode or something to counter it. But that kind of shift in behavior is very, very interesting to me. And that changes our perception to our AI assistants. They are maybe recognized as something like a little servants that you can command to and then get some function done. But maybe by bringing, but at the same time, they are very magical to people. Even having like a technology, computer science background, I don't know like how Alexa works or how Google Home works whatsoever. It's a complete black box, and but we don't know. We don't have the kind of proper way to embrace this magicality. Some people are very, very afraid. Some people just take it as granted and use it as a function. Maybe by bringing materials like crystal, which is very culturally rich. If you kind of we went to Athens together, and then we saw this kind of naturally grown massive crystal like this big in the museum. And then it's like people will touch it, and then there's a kind of spiritual power that's coming out of it. Then you want to interact with it. That kind of magical spiritual experience that crystal naturally serves could be quite interesting addition or enhancement to the interaction that we are starting to have with AI systems. So I started with experimenting with the visions of AI. So this is like putting a camera behind the crystal, looking at myself, taking a picture. It's very convoluted, but you can see myself taking a picture within the crystal just to kind of give the sense of something is living inside it, aesthetically how to achieve that kind of sense in the exhibition space. And then started to looking at how to house this new interaction in the exhibition context. Started looking at this Butsudan objects. They are miniature shrines placed almost like each household in Japan has this miniature shrine at home, which is to enshrine either ancestor or Shinto gods, and then they are usually placed in the living area or like high up in the wall. And then daily basis, people would like agree to it or like say hi or do some sort of pray or put some offering on like a bowl of rice or something. And then that kind of, you are talking to or communicating to something that's very spiritual, something that's unmaterial. And then that kind of similarity between that kind of spiritual experience and AI experience somehow became really interesting. And there's kind of some variations, inspirations that I took in designing the shrine itself. In designing, my colleague at creative agency that I'm working for, TAKRAM, Lucas, helped the product design a lot. And then we came to the one on the right. Yeah. Because it's very, I'll be honest, the conversation between me having technology background and the Swarovski coming from very home decor, luxurious market, the conversation was very difficult. We didn't find the common language until like maybe last month or like 6 weeks ago. And then we came to this home shrine idea that looks great, it's gonna be great. And but I think we together thought that we need a little bit of context being explained and in a very kind of visually engaging way. So I collaborated with George Shelbourne, who is running this animation company called Mute Animation. And we storyboarded together, and then he came up with this amazing animation, which is explaining almost like a kind of brief history of interfaces at home. So it starts with like a dial phone, and then kind of switches, light turning off and on. So it used to be very kind of physical and tangible, and the materialistic representation was corresponding to the function that it executes. But then it's becoming kind of smartphones taking over. All the functions are tapped away, but at the same time, it's kind of losing the material quality. Maybe by bringing crystal back into the conversation, the equation, then we might be able to embrace the magicality of it. So that kind of context is explained in animation. Some photos from the production of the shrine, and here we are. And in the exhibition, it's a sort of semi-working prototype. So you stand in front of it, and then the shrine is going to start talking to you, asking you to place your both hands on the crystal. As you do so, it asks you what day in the week do you want it to tell you about? Is that right? Yeah. And then so you say Sunday, tomorrow, Wednesday, whatever day you want to know about. And it says, well, on Sunday, the sun has got its hat on. I can see you'll be swimming in the River Rhine. Have a great time in Basel. So it is a weather forecasting, which is a typical function of AI assistants. But it wraps the whole experience in this spiritual, a little bit ritual by using this kind of materialistic quality of crystals. And then the tone of voice is developed so that it feels more like it is a future. The data is there, but it still is a future, and it's unpredictable. And that kind of ambiguity is enhanced by the tone of the voice. So yeah, hope you can.
It's amazing when it works.
Your hands didn't really work well, did they?
I need training, but
Yeah.
it's remarkable because it is something that's so much current. Artificial intelligence and voice recognition are going to change the way that we live in the world completely and utterly. It's going to destroy the keyboard very quickly, which has been our road into the world for 200 years, and it affects the way we write, how we communicate, how we know each other, and this is going to utterly change that. And I guess in some ways what you're doing is telling us what a big change this is by celebrating what is quickly becoming quite a banal object, but you're saying, pay attention, look at this. But
Exactly.
it's also, I think, about a kind of nostalgia that the digital explosion is wiping out so many categories of object. And you're kind of plugging into an idea that stuff still matters.
Yeah, that's true. I think the rapid change that we experience is not, it is happening very rapidly, and our body and perception, which is dragging this kind of history, century of histories, is not keeping up the pace, right? So maybe we will have some objects, we will need to have objects just for the sake of our nostalgia. Maybe that kind of device can serve that purpose too. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what to talk about these photos. It's just funny photos.
Let's pay no attention.
Yeah.
But your kind of practice is still about making special things and special experiences,
Yes.
which is
Or
now,
we tried.
and that's also a kind of response to the way that the world is dematerializing, that we actually don't have so many categories of possession that we once had, that we don't need a camera, we probably don't need a watch, but somehow it hangs on. But you make things which are very analog.
Yeah.
Well, I think our practice is mostly about combining lots of different ideas through say, histories and objects and forms and colors, processes, to almost create like a new or unknown appreciation for the things that we already have. It's not necessarily about adding a new thing, so to speak. And in terms of smart technology, maybe I am a little bit afraid of it.
It's behind you.
Yeah. I mean, we're very analog, but I think, yeah, like she said, I think our main interest is kind of create something that, talks about ideas and, people can kind of take something home as an idea, but not necessarily have to take the thing home to, doesn't have to own it to appreciate it, hopefully. And to be very honest, we can sustain ourselves because of places like this, where we are not in a position where we have to produce a lot to sell a lot. And I think it's an interesting situation because, like you said, we are still making things, and but then we are also making things about things, and we always try to have multiple layers or kind of multiple functions for the object. One is, aesthetics is one thing. But we also know some people appreciate it for the kind of conceptual basis.
I mean, upstairs, as well as the new work coming from designers all around the world, there is a layer of work from Rodman, from Rietveld, from Prouvé, many of whom were practicing decorative art, design through the field of decorative arts. Do you see what you're doing as kind of inheriting that?
Yeah. When we do, especially like student lectures, and when we get into either art or design talk, we always
I'm not asking that question.
I know, please don't, but we always resort to it's more decorative art, which precedes both practice in terms of categorization. And I think that's also the area we are more interested in. It's even interior architectural in nature, some of the decorative art stuff. And the function of where these things used to be shown, which was churches and funded by many. And those are kind of sustained, that model is being sustained in a different form, like museums maybe privately funded museums as well. Those places are doing the same thing. And what we do like about those, now what we call art, is that you go there, not many people can own it, but you still be able to appreciate these things and take home the ideas. And that is the kind of...
Well, art is useless, which is why we value it.
Yeah.
And design may be not useless enough sometimes.
I actually think design is more serious in that sense, because everybody's got an opinion about chairs. People can just say, that's beautiful, but it looks very uncomfortable, and that's their opinion. And
well, I have to tell you, design museums are constantly being told that we can't just make design about chairs, but the public wants to see them. Where are your chairs?
yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Frank, your piece is really asking questions, isn't it? It's a proposal, but it's really also asking us to think about how difficult life is with the overload of information, of speed, of the kind of the unbelievably rapid pace of transformation. Are you an optimist?
Ooh. I tend to alternate between optimism and pessimism. With this piece, I'm quite optimistic, to be honest. I think I do like it when technology or a technology teaches something about what it means to be human, or what the human experience is. And especially in digital technology, we often feel that it follows a very reductionist approach. So for example, today it becomes very easy to enter a virtual world through, for example, virtual reality technology. But the problem is that you're always entering a world that is created by someone else for you. And you put on the goggles and you're instantly in there. And with this piece, actually, I try to be more ambiguous in the sense that it's still giving access to a different form of reality, but it's very individual and very sort of based on how everyone is slightly wired slightly different. So it's very much a brain effect. It's a brain anomaly almost that we can even do this. And I think that is quite interesting when we start to think about where the research is going at the moment. So there's a lot of research going into consciousness and what it is and what it means. And actually, I like this idea that there's not a scientist in the world that can explain what consciousness is. And how it's produced, but the only reason that we can talk about it is that we experience it, and therefore we can project it onto others. And I think this is a very interesting point in time, and I like to sort of bring that ambiguity back into the way we talk about realities and the way we get access to them. So I see it in this way as very much as an interface, but it is a bit more open-ended.
I was interested to see those drawings which showed the first stages of thinking about how it would be configured with the armchair mode with the object, in a way, because that has a very different character. There's definitely a medical tinge to the configuration that you have now.
I think we would have liked to have the recliner variation, but the problem would be literally access, being able to actually make it adaptable for many different body sizes and shapes. But at the same time, my work often deals with medical technologies, and for me, medical technologies have a very special position because it deals very much with the human body. It's highly technological on the one hand. It's very sort of meticulous. It's very well crafted, and then at the same time, it's tapping into these very sort of human, almost animalistic elements. And I really like that contrast, because for me, it's almost a way to. Yeah, almost a way to access the sublime experience of nature as it was described years ago in sort of the romantic periods. For me, it's sort of almost like a technological sublime where you can actually peek into the vastness of it all. And I sort of like that contrast. And what I think is nice about the piece now is that it sort of brings together those two worlds. So what is very interesting for me in exhibiting it now is that actually people come out of it after the experience and they describe something that's completely unmedical. It's like they describe experiencing a day at the beach or lying down in the grass looking at leaves overhead, for example. And I think that's a very fascinating perspective.
And your work could go in a lot of different directions. I mean, in some ways, the skills that you've put to work here, working with Swarovski as engineers, suggests that if you wanted to, you could be working in what might be described as mainstream industrial design.
I hope it does in a way. I hope that always, like with these ideas, I see them as live experiments. So I'm very curious to see what the response is, and hopefully based on that we can get some insight, and that insight can then hopefully trickle down into a wider audience. And I think this is also why this award in particular is so interesting, because you get the platform to actually do a piece like this and actually have an impact more in the sort of insight or inspirational side of the industry, which I think is rare in a way.
Yosuke, I got it even more wrong that time. You work in a design consultancy. How does this relate to the work, your piece relate to the work that
Right.
you do as a day job, I guess?
Even though I think the piece that I'm exhibiting here is obviously an exhibition piece, a discussion piece, but the process is very much similar to to what we do at TAKRAM. I mean, the brief might be coming from not ourselves, like clients, but we always talk about like how technologies are changing our behavior, how we are changing technologies, and how we are reinterpreting technologies, and then somehow coming up with insights or scenarios, the context that this new idea can sit in. In this project, it was the world in which cultural companies like Swarovski can be taking a role of this sort of cultural mediator between us and tech giants like Google Home, Alexa, you name it. So that's a kind of, and then visualizing the scenario or a vision in a way that people can experience and discuss. So you can swap the vision with a new product and service and the value that they create, and then the prototype to be a more kind of functionally kind of value-serving prototype. So even though obviously this is not meant to be a commercialized product, it's more of a conversation starter, but the process and the philosophy is not so dissimilar to what I do in day job, I think.
It's interesting. We at the Design Museum, the British scientist who created the underlying science that makes Alexa work came to see us a couple of weeks ago, and we were trying to persuade him to take part in a project we're doing at the museum, which would involve hacking Alexa to do uncanny things. And he said, no, take far too long, much too much time. And then next week, of course, there was the outburst of mocking laughter from Alexas around the world. It's so prescient.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that kind of, the moment of break of the system is much more interesting because it inevitably breaks at some point, or like in some cases it always breaks. But we are sort of given those technology as if they are perfect, as if they are something that's universal, something that everyone should be embracing as it is. But there could be an alternative. Someone might be putting in the shrine. There are some other objects than crystal. There are like things like a hand sanitizer or like a pile of batteries. So I imagine that this person using this home shrine device, and then putting those devices, hoping in a hope that this kind of objects will enhance or strengthen the prediction quality. So the batteries are nothing to do with the functioning of Alexa or Crystal, but maybe they put
it's
like
an offering.
Kind of offering. It's an offering. So that kind of misuse or misinterpretation it does open a kind of rich context for us as a designer to kind of create narrative and then kind of maybe spark the imagination a little bit more.
How did you shape the crystal?
It was actually pre-shaped. It's one of the existing crystals that Swarovski offers. I chose this one because it has the look of this naturally formed, but still got some artificial surfaces which are quite interesting. And then it has this kind of massive chunkiness which you naturally want to touch.
Did the four of you discuss what you were doing while this project was going on? Did you?
Briefly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we had a Skype chat to kind of catch up. Also because, you knew each other. I didn't really, well, I thought I didn't, know them, but we were kind of, we were actually working with same people, and I had met him before, and Bernadette, and they had same tutors at RCA.
Yeah.
So it was nice to kind of meet and find that out. So we had some chat, but then I don't know, like at least for us, like we kind of talking didn't really have any kind of influence or into the process. But I don't know about you guys.
I think we had some interesting back-channel discussions going on. But I think that's the nice thing is that in this group, like everyone was quite open and sharing the ideas and not so much afraid that anyone would sort of like take it up and like run with it or anything. So I think it felt very relaxed and informal in that way.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting also that this is a range of design. You've all worked with collaborators on these projects. So you had sound design from Sam Conran, and your partner did the form, and you two worked together. So I mean, maybe that's also a reflection on the direction that design is at this particular moment. I mean, the idea of the sole genius is not a very fashionable one at the moment.
No.
I'm sure it will come back. There will be a Philippe Stark revival, undoubtedly, soon. But at the moment, this is a time for group working and partnerships.
I think so.
I think
Yeah.
it may have been all that, like it may have been before also. It's just that they wouldn't be mentioned. I think. I think that's sort of like the interest is different this time around. But also the technology, as it's becoming more complex, like you can't do it all. Like you need collaborators, and you need to know like where your limitations lie, and then hand it off. I think.
Yeah.
Also, like I think all of us work is quite kind of focusing on this smartness and what it can, like the alternative interpretation of smartness, and then in delivering that kind of a little bit complex message, I think designers might be kind of focusing more on kind of the interpretation, the translation of the concept and the experience or the object, and rather than not necessarily the manufacturing of the piece, which we definitely need collaborators for, as Frank already told.
I'm going to ask the audience for questions in a moment, so if you could reflect on what you're going to ask in a minute. But just to finish off the conversation here, I mean, from what you were saying about technology and manufacturing, it does seem that for a designer to make an impact on that part of the world, it becomes harder and harder to do it as an independent voice. The smartphone comes from a closed culture, you could say, that Apple's design team have enormous access to resources, but unlike the Olivetti model, perhaps from the 1960s, when Sottsass and Bellini were allowed to maintain studios in the centre of Milan and to actually take on work not for Olivetti, now the price of having access to those resources is becoming more and more opaque, that you pay the price by becoming identified only with one manufacturer. So do you feel that you're actually having the chance to have, I mean, you're all starting conversations in different ways. Is that enough?
I mean, a platform like this was a great opportunity because we get to access the very resources that we definitely need to deliver a message to the wider audience. So like I made this project in the hope that in the future or coming couple of years, Swarovski somehow starts talking to these one of the tech giants to collaborate together or something. That kind of, I'm not sure how we can do without this kind of platform. That's my honest answer.
Right. Has anybody got any questions they would like to ask or observations to make? Any smart livers in the audience?
Yeah, just a question. What's been the most important thing you're taking away from this experience, from the award, and working for the last 6 months together with each other and also with Swarovski?
Are you asking this to all of us or anyone in specific?
Except me.
I think for us, the most interesting part of this which we kind of, we knew this already kind of going in, but, we we get to work with material manufacturer, which isn't usually the case. And, and obviously Swarovski knows a lot about their materials because they manufacture the material, but they also process it. And like I was talking about this, technologies they developed. And it was, and working with Peter, the production team at Swarovski was interesting. And so also being very small independent studio, it's always a struggle to find a fabricator and production company who take on your weird projects. But this was the other way around. This big company coming to you to offer them, ask them to do strange things. So that was revelating and was very meaningful in that sense. Yeah.
You want to go?
Frank?
I think for me it was more the opportunity to actually show a new direction or a new potential direction that hopefully, like I said before, like could be picked up in like a broader sense and trickle down. But on a very personal level, it was also just like being able to sort of work with everyone and actually sort of get the stories and like get insight in how Swarovski operates and all the technologies. I mean, I'm a little bit of a geek. I don't mind. So that was very interesting for me personally also.
Yeah, for me, similar too. But as I said, the conversation that I had with Swarovski team has been really interesting kind of negotiation in a way. And then that's been such a kind of great learning experience in itself. And the fact that companies like Swarovski chose a very kind of technology background, working with technology, and then somehow co-create something that's new, and that is very kind of encouraging, and I hope that kind of collaboration continues in the near future too.
There are no companies like Swarovski.
Yeah,
there's only one.
It's very unusual. Yeah.
Could we have a microphone so we can record it?
Thank you. You just caught with your last sentence, there are no companies like Swarovski. I was just asking myself, what is Swarovski? Because it's interesting to see these very clean results of your research, and congratulations, it's certainly a big achievement to be here in Design Miami at Basel. But Swarovski, if you go from, let's say, the Collectors Club to the institution in Wattens to all the stores around the world, I have a hard time to understand what is Swarovski in reality. I don't know if my question was too abstract or...
Well, I don't know if we are qualified to answer. Yeah. Well, that's actually, I think, we did know Swarovski a little bit, maybe more than, perception going into the project. But as I understand, they do have very different business. The Swarovski you see at airport, that's actually a gem business. They use the same material and they do the cutting, but they are actually quite a different market.
I think Swarovski is what you make of it.
That's good.
And that's really, I mean, it's, their business is so much larger than you would imagine. That ranges from optics to little figurines, if I may mention those, and jewelry, objects for the home, to projects like what we were invited to do. And I think there is something in that for everybody. So again, it's very much up to you. What is it to you?
That's the question I was asking because I try to understand how does it come that you have this huge palette, as you said, from jewelry to cloth.
But that's
But I think you answered it really well to say that Swarovski is what you make of it, because I think the answer is skill.
Yeah.
And skill that's being used for generations, and skill which doesn't stand still. To stay the same, you have to change.
And I think, as I understand, all this branching out into different fields came kind of organically from development of material, and then the cutting technique, and then kind of got applied to optics, and then Sandaria components and cat eyes, the road. What do you call it? Cat's
eyes.
Yeah, cat's eyes. They make cat's eyes, which was we didn't know was, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's quite interesting, but there are many companies that, like Mitsubishi in Japan, they do so many different things, starting from some. I don't even remember what they started with, but
Sewing machines?
no. But yeah, I don't know. But I guess how these different things all at Swarovski means the branding exercise is going very well in certain sense, I think, as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if we answered your questions. Yeah.
So we didn't get
Swarovski are master cutters and glass makers.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to make glass. People always compare Swarovski to diamonds. It's so hard to make a crystal. Figure out how to make a crystal. It consists of so many different chemical compositions. They have to be melted. They go into the melting pot, come out, or poured into a mold, have to be cooled down, then cut. And then they go into these various different jewelry pieces, or clothes, or chandeliers, or cat's eyes.
Yeah.
So it's so crucial for Swarovski. Swarovski is an ingredient, and it relies on the designers or the artists to implement the product in a beautiful and creative way. In terms of branding, there is one consumer brand, Swarovski, which is associated with the retail store Swarovski, which is what the world knows. But there is still that business-to-business side of Swarovski. And Swarovski is only an ingredient. It's not the consumer brand, and that is the big dilemma for Swarovski. Swarovski is probably the biggest branding dilemma out there, because we do so much, but the world only has one fraction associated with the brand Swarovski, and that's the retail stores. And it's not the full story of Swarovski. Exactly.
Okay.
I tried.
Are we seeing any more questions? If not, I will say thank you to the designers of the future.